Hey, all right. We are live here in Facebook land on Instagram. We'll get this shared out to some of our groups and stuff. How are you, Amir?
I'm good. Had a little bit of a cold after traveling a little bit overseas, but back full force and excited to tackle May. Should be a good month.
Yeah, that's awesome. What are you looking forward to this month?
I mean, there's a lot to look forward to. I'm kind of intrigued to see how the economy keeps playing out with the tariff news. I think April was kind of the month of a lot of noise, in generally in the markets. And I think things are stabilizing, as stable as they can be these days. So I think kind of from a market perspective, I'm trying to see like now that the noise is gone, what does that mean for the market in general? And then May, I mean, most markets, May is kind of the beginning of really the busy season, right? School is starting to get out. We're in peak spring months, so a lot of seasonality is starting to take effect. So we should start seeing really good kind of indicators of where the asset class is with kind of performance over the next few months. So we're getting into really kind of what is the best time of the year in the short term rental world. Well, in most markets at least.
Yeah, exactly. And for data gurus like you're probably really interested to see, especially we have a change in administration. What is that going to do? There's all this political talk and economic talk. Are people going on vacation this year? Do you have any like early indicators yet?
Yeah, I mean, the early indicators are less international travel to the United States, especially from places like Canada. So we're seeing less influx of international travel, which obviously has an impact on industry. But I would say, on the contrary, local travel, from what we're seeing, especially drive to destinations, is performing well. The booking windows are getting a little bit shorter, meaning that people are booking, less ahead of time, meaning that they're not booking a year, months at a time. A lot of times they're booking a few weeks, even a few days at a time. But from a volume perspective, from occupancy's perspective, we're not seeing much of a change compared to what was expected. What we were seeing last year, it's really more the booking window before they book. That's really the biggest indicator. Obviously, a little bit less international travel to the United States, especially from Canada and some European countries.
Do you think that we're going to see more domestic travel from the US?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of my bet. What's going to happen? There's always that discussion of, hey, they might be, we're getting close to recession. There might be a recession coming. Some people will make a case that we're already in a recession. That doesn't scare me if I'm in the short-term rental world. In fact, there's always been kind of data that supports, during recessionary times, travel doesn't really slow down. It just changes, meaning that people aren't traveling less. They're just traveling less far, if that makes sense. Like they're not traveling internationally. They're not going to Europe for a week's vacation. They're doing multiple shorter trips to drive to destinations. So we're both in the Carolinas. I'm in Charlotte, you're in Nashville. So here, like if you're in Charlotte, instead of, going out, flying to Cancun, right? You're going taking a long weekend to Asheville, or you're going to one of the beaches in North Carolina. So we're going to see a lot more on that. And for our asset class, short-term rentals, they're actually more affordable. Don't read into what they say on the internet that Airbnbs are more expensive than hotels. If you think about it, heads and beds perspective, Airbnbs and short-term rentals are definitely a better bang for the buck. And that's proven to be the case in all prior recessions where kind of our asset classes performed the best in COVID. So I think, you know, if anything, the downside of any kind of economic downturn is that we'll just have different type of travel, less foreign travel, more domestic drive-to travel. That's just historically what it's been.
Yeah, yeah, totally makes sense. So interesting outlooks for 2025. Let's go backwards a little bit. Introduce yourselves to everybody now that we've had a couple minutes here in the chat, diving really deep. And y'all, if you have any questions, please feel free throughout the live here to drop your questions in the comments. Even afterwards, if you see this video later when we email it out, if you see it on Facebook or Instagram later, feel free to drop your comments in the chat. Let us know where you're tuning in from today. And maybe we'll even be able to give you some quick insights if you want to let us know where your short-term rentals are as well. Drop all that in the comments, and we'll go. So, Amir, tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, what you represent. all that good stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Emir Dukic. I'm the CEO of Rabu. And best way to think about Rabu, we were building the Zillow for short-term rentals. So if you're looking to buy or sell a short-term rental, we want you to start and end your search on Rabu.com. We have a lot of proprietary listings, so people are able to list their properties for sale for free on Rabu.com. We also take all properties on MLS. We underwrite it automatically for Airbnb potential, Airbnb revenue, and then we connect you to the best agents like Tyler and the whole Savvy team and the best lenders that can actually help you on a transaction. So not only will we help you find the best property, we will connect you to the best local resources that will actually help you acquire the property. Our data, I always say, no data tool, Rabu included, others like AirDNA included, they're only directionally correct. In this STR world, in the short-term rental world, it's all about local knowledge and the actual experience you provide to the guest at the end of the day. So as part of that, we've partnered with the best agents and the best lenders who can actually help you acquire the asset and then connect you to the right resources to operate the asset as well. So that's what we do. Prior to this, Rabu actually used to be a property management company. We actually used to manage over 500 properties all across the United States. We had like 40, 50 properties here in Charlotte, North Carolina, which is where we're based. We had hotels in Miami Beach. We had mansions in Malibu. We've had multifamily buildings in Seattle. So we've had properties all over the country. We know what it's like to operate at short-term rental. We know the ins and outs of it, and we try to display that in our data. So again, best way to think about us, we're the Zillow for short-term rentals. If you want to buy or sell a place, we're the place to start and end your search, and we connect you to the best resources to help you in your STR journey.
What do you think is the hardest part these days for people finding short-term rentals?
Honestly, I think it's finding the local resources that can help them actually succeed. And what I mean by that is, there's data tools out there like us that are great, that are really helpful in helping you kind of get started. But real estate is so local. And the way you perform, especially with short-term rentals, is so important. It's more important than what the data tells you. So building out the team on the ground that helps you operate the property is the hardest and most important thing that I think a lot of people overlook. They think they can find a property and just turn it into an STR and kind of set it and forget it. But it doesn't work like that. I mean, you've seen this through your properties, Tyler, and with a lot of your clients. It's an active investment. You have to spend time on it. You have to invest into the amenities, into the experience that the guest has. Otherwise, it's not going to perform to the standards and to the returns that you're looking for. So that's one of the things that we always like to drive home when we talk to individuals is this is work. This is an active investment strategy. There's money to be made for sure, but it's not a set it and forget it type strategy. If you want to do that, LTRs are probably your better option, long-term rentals, or even, in investing into, high yield accounts, right? More traditional, investment accounts. If you want to make real money, short-term rentals are the way to go. But it's going to take an active investment. You and I could have the same Airbnb right next to each other. You could buy a property in a master built community that's exactly the same. But the way we furnish it, the way we operate it, the type of hospitality that we provide, the cleaner that we hire, the photos that we take, the pricing that we set will make all the difference. Our delta in revenue could be 60% based on those factors and how we operate it. So that's honestly the hardest part, and that's why it's important to build out the right team from the get-go locally so that you can be successful at this.
Yeah, I think ultimately it's like, it used to be top 50%, bottom 50%, right? And the bottom 50% was like mom and pops or somebody's beach house that they rented out for a few weeks during summer and they used a lot of the time. And then there was some professional investors that rented out their places all the time and used it a couple times a year. And now I look at it as like top 10%, bottom 90%, right? So there's such a large delta nowadays in between like that, the top properties and kind of those lower tier properties. And the top properties are getting everything right. They have the best reviews. They're doing the best revenue management and pricing. They're managing the property really, really well. They're marketing it really well. They're doing direct bookings. They're, online. They've got influencers, right? We're seeing a huge rise in the effect of social media influencers on short-term rentals right now. I just hired an influencer to come over from Raleigh Her name is Allison, and her Instagram is Raleigh Wonderlust. And she's incredible. And every time she comes over, she's thousands of likes, and we do tens of thousands of dollars in bookings. And it's these people that are really doing things the right way, that are succeeding nowadays. And to your point, you definitely could have something right next door to each other. It would be like having a McDonald's and a Burger King, but it really depends on how well are they running that McDonald's and Burger King. They're going to do totally different numbers based on dozens of different factors. So it's not just one short-term rental or another nowadays. It's a lot more than that.
No doubt. And I think that's the one thing that people kind of don't think about. And, even just hiring a property manager is often not good enough, right? It's building out the entire experience. I know you've seen this plenty, and I think you do this a lot of your properties, is during the initial investment phase, once you buy the asset, I know you've had properties that you've invested hundreds of thousands of dollars into adding the right amenities so that guests can have that top 10% experience. There's a big, I mean, it's a math equation, right? What money do I need to put in to get the ROI out of it that I need? And it's right across the board. It's from the asset itself, but then it's way beyond the property. So that's by far, from my perspective, the hardest part. And again, that's why it's so important to build out the right team that can educate on it. And that's what I love about what Savvy does, right? You guys are right there in the thick of things with your clients, and it's the right way to approach it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the good thing about working with the right team across the board. You have the right lender, the right real estate agent, the right data platform, to really make sure that you're coming into this with all the knowledge that you need, all the boots on the ground support, the revenue management, all the tips and tricks, all the things that you need to really be super successful. Because otherwise, this definitely can be a difficult thing to do. It's becoming more and more difficult. I think it's not becoming easier. It's becoming more expensive for sure. And the whole industry is maturing. So what do you see? Like, what is the next kind of maturing point for the industry? I think right now it's design and amenities, right? Kind of putting together, I used to look at short-term rentals as hotel rooms in a home. And it was very basic. It was, Amazon and Wayfair furniture, and they were nice, fine. And there was a novelty in stepping through the door and you're in somebody else's house and you have this host that you can talk to. And now it's like the standards are so high and people walk in with truly high expectations, which is, well earned on their end, I think, because they're paying a lot of money. Like right now in our new place that we just redesigned, we spent $300,000 on it, but we're expecting over $1,000 a night now ADR on that property, and 70-80% occupancy. We want to do 300 or 350,000 a year on it. So for you, what do you see as like the next step after that? Like if you have a crystal ball?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to tell. To also just kind of give you my analogy in the industry, which I think makes a lot of sense. Through the early stages, since Airbnb kind of came to market and kind of through the COVID years, the industry's kind of gone through its like baby phase, as in like everything it did was cute. Everybody loved even like the littlest and most simplest thing. I think right now, the phase that we're in, in May of 2025 is like the awkward teenage years. Like we're starting to see some acne. We're starting to see like some things that are developing. People are trying to figure out what this thing is going to grow up to be in 5 years from now. So I really think we're kind of through that like awkward teenage phase right as we speak, which I'm excited about because I think groups like us, groups like you guys, and all the other kind of great resources that are out there are kind of going to define what the adult version of this asset class looks like. So that's kind of my take over the industry is I think it's all going to continue into becoming more professionalized, into becoming more a well-rounded adult where people know what to expect when they go from one property to another. I think AI is going to have a big piece in that. That's going to help kind of create some standards, some commonality between the experience that people can expect. I think we're also going to see more and more purpose-built communities for short-term rentals. I honestly think that some regulations are good in the industry because it helps kind of create that next standard of what a property should look like. So to me, it's going to be a combination of, hey, what can we create as like the standard experience that everybody expects going forward? And then how can we go create a more consistent product that everybody can get behind and in the right locations? I think it's going to be less of free for all. And I think as part of all that, the industry will become more accepted for what it is. And I think it's going to pick up a lot of momentum over time. We're just, again, kind of going through that awkward phase right now of trying to set the ground rules of what the adult version of the industry will be in a handful of years. So, but I think it's the right thing. It's happened it's happened with any real estate asset class. Long-term rentals went through similar things. So I think it's really about kind of establishing a consistency and execution that increases the confidence level that people have when they're staying in an Airbnb or a short-term rental.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. And I think, that's a lot to do with what their expectations are when they walk in. It was rocky there for a little bit in terms of like, you had this, kind of social media flood of Airbnb bust and all these cleaning fee things and, people saying they're going back to hotels. I don't think ultimately Airbnb kind of started as kind of almost a roommate situation or to replace a hotel room. But I think both industries have their spot, right? Hotel rooms are going to be for quick trips. You go, you're overnight, it's quick in and out. You don't want to deal with a lot of stuff. You don't need a kitchen. You don't need a lot of stuff. But I think right now, you're seeing big groups travel together more than they ever have been able to before, right? And I think that this is something people are really going to get addicted to, traveling with these large groups that they weren't able to before, right? Nobody's paying $500 a night times 10 or 15 hotel rooms to bring their whole family together. They were maybe finding a camp or something like that, but it's very, very difficult, I think, kind of historically to get big groups together with the way that the hotel industry grew and the travel industry grew. And now you have these big short-term rentals. We increased our capacity to 26 now. And I sold the home next door to a client of mine. And I said, listen, a big part of buying this place is let's put the listings together. Let's host 50 people. So we created a pathway in between the two homes that we can turn off, when we have our individual listings rented, but that we are going to charge a pretty significant amount for to bring 50 people together. So what do you think? Like, what is the hotel industry competition anymore, or is there a big separation now?
I don't think they're competition. I mean, first of all, I'm a fan of hotels for the convenience that they provide when I'm traveling for business or when I'm trying to make a quick pit stop somewhere. I was just traveling overseas for a family spring break. We rented an Airbnb. It was my family. I'm married, I have 3 boys, and then my sister and her husband and son, and then my dad came, rented this gorgeous Airbnb in Tuscany, and then on the flight back, on our way back, we rented a hotel that's attached to the airport that we're flying from. Extremely convenient for us. We had to rent 2 rooms, which was awkward. My boys slept in a separate room from us. Now they were adjoining, but they weren't connected. But hotels to me have a purpose, as you said, business travel. Quick, convenient travel, traveling as a single individual or even as a couple, or if you're looking for like a luxury spa experience, you can stay at a luxury hotel. I think hotels are great for that. They're meant for that. But anytime you get into traveling as a family and have 3 boys, it's terrible to stay at a hotel. Anytime my kids play, competitive soccer and we'll go stay at a hotel because that's what we have to do. And it's just always a bad experience. We try to cram 5 people in a room when we can, or if we're lucky enough to find adjoining rooms with like adjoining door that connects them. That's great, but that's rare to find. But even then, you get to the hotel after the games and everybody's kind of congregating in the lobby and there's hundreds of people there. It's noisy. It's just not a great experience. And I think that's what Airbnbs excel at, is bringing groups together, whether it's family, friends, certain events, and getting everybody together in one space that they can enjoy and have a great time. So to me, they're very similar, as they would say in technology terms, use cases. If you want something convenient, hotels are great for that. If you are looking for an experience or traveling as a larger group, I think short-term rentals are the better way to go. And I think that's also kind of a trend that we're going to continue seeing more and more. And we're seeing from a data perspective too, is that short-term rentals, during kind of the peak years in 2020, 2021, you could get away with having, a 1-bedroom or a studio or 2-bedroom apartment in, Charlotte, for example, but that no longer can compete with a hotel. It just doesn't. The value proposition isn't there. It's hard for a short-term rental to compete with an hotel if it's sub two rooms, unless it's, some really kind of amazing experience that you'll see some of these great short-term rental entrepreneurs are doing. where they're building these like unique tree houses or really kind of unusual experiences.
Hmm.
Like those will work in smaller units, but I think anything else, if you're doing a short-term rental, it has to be 3+ bedrooms
Yeah.
because you're catering to that exact thing that you alluded to, Tyler, which is groups, right? That are looking for that experience and looking for that community that it provides that you don't get out of hotels.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting too when you have, so if we talk about Asheville for a second, we had this major weather event. We had this big hurricane that came, and it's really shaken up our inventory here. We've lost a massive amount of studios and one bedrooms, and ultimately, I think you had a lot of travelers that did go back to hotels because the consistency for those studios and one bedrooms wasn't there. They were maybe homestays. It was kind of risky, and there are people out there that liked that, but ultimately I think that's kind of going to shake out of the market. And I found one really interesting thing. We lost right after the hurricane something like 5, then the next month it was 10%, then the next month it was 15% of our short-term rentals in all of Asheville. Then it went up to 20, then it went down to 17. So some people relaunched, maybe these are places that had repairs or something like that. But now getting into the high season, and I just looked yesterday at April data, we're down 25%. We lost 25% of our Airbnb inventory in the Asheville area, which is crazy to think about, but it's going to be good, I think, because it kind of washed out all the crappy inventory. And I think it's really, really going to raise the tide for everybody else that is here. So what do you think about that? Are there other events that are going to happen that are going to kind of wash out the competition, or what I like to think of it as like the low ADRs, right? It kind of washed out all low ADRs where people are shopping and going, would I take this kind of piece of crap, 3-bedroom for $100 a night, and I'm value shopping, or would I take this one with the amenities for $500 a night? It's difficult. But when the question is now I'm between 300 and 500, I think they go more towards the 500. So what other events are you guys seeing, from the data side that are having this kind of effect on inventory?
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting. I think a lot of it's, first of all, I think there's going to be a lot of natural selection. The consumer is going to tell people what works and what doesn't, right? So kind of going back to what we discussed earlier, doing kind of it's cute baby phase, you could get away with getting a single, a 2 or 3-bedroom apartment, throwing some IKEA furniture or even Facebook Marketplace furniture, because supply was so low and demand was high. You would rent it out, and you were doing fine. But that doesn't mean that you were actually running a great operation. It's just you were at the right time in the right place. But now, as kind of demand, well, for a while, supply was outgrowing demand, meaning there's more properties available than demand was growing. We're starting to see some natural selection of those properties that really should have never been short-term rentals, that were fine with it during a high demand period, kind of drop off. So I think there's going to be a lot of this natural selection with the consumers saying, people that had these subpar Airbnbs, like, hey, we don't want you, right? Like, you're just not what we're looking for. So I think that's probably a big byproduct of what we're seeing in Asheville. I think the next big piece is I do think there's going to be more regulations. And again, I think they're positive for the industry, because not every property should be an Airbnb, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's just what it is, and that's okay, right? Like, you shouldn't have an Airbnb in a primary residential community where people, and families live. It's just not a good mix.
Yeah.
So this is speaking from experience at Rabu. When we used to manage properties, we used to have properties in, where all our neighbors were, owners, right? And one owner bought a property. There's no regulations that prevented it. And we're like, great, good job. Like, the numbers at that point, again, this was like 2021, made sense. But it became apparent very quickly that wasn't the right match for that community, right? It's not a standard for the community, and it shouldn't be a standard for the community, and that's okay, right? The highest and best use is not a short-term rental, and it's also not fair to the neighbors. So we think regulations are good as long as they're not, you can go over the top like they did in New York City, right? That's a little bit over the top, but I think kind of finding that middle ground of like, hey, if you meet X, Y, and Z requirements, then it's short-term rental friendly, and you should allow short-term rentals. I think that's going to be part of the natural selection as well. So those are kind of the big ones. Of course, there's going to be events that happen, but I think those events, all they do, like the unfortunate flooding in Western North Carolina, but I think what those events do just kind of they kind of accelerate what was bound to happen inevitably anyways. Of course there were some strategic issues, times where maybe there's a flooding that was just too much to overcome, where the house unfortunately had to be completely renovated, or God forbid torn down and rebuilt again. So there's going to be some of that, but I think a lot of it's just going to be natural selection. The consumer saying we don't want what you're offering, and that doesn't mean that short-term rentals aren't popular. It's just that means that your product just wasn't a fit any longer to what the industry wants.
Yeah, exactly. Well, let's shift focus a little bit. Tell us, what have been some challenges in terms of the data and short-term rentals? You guys have been doing this for a long time in terms of scraping and, trying to analyze what properties are doing today, what they may do in the future. What's been some of the challenges, and what are you excited about for some of the ways that you're going to tackle those challenges?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's always challenges. I mean, this is not unusual to Rabu either. We get countless, messages or emails where people will say, "Hey, your data is not accurate because X, Y, and Z," right? And we always tell people, our data is directionally correct in the sense that we know when a property was booked, we know how much it was booked for, but we don't know all the other underlying data behind it, which is impossible for us to know without actually having access to your booking data. And then we're also predicting how your property is going to perform going forward based on what we're seeing in the market conditions, what the seasonality looks like, what the booking volume looks like, how booking trends are changing. So that's kind of the biggest challenge for us, is one, telling people that these projections are based on the data we've collected, which we feel highly confident in, which is the same data that other data providers collect. We're translating in one way based on our own best estimates of what we're seeing from future performance, from past performance, from seasonality aspects, and from trends around. We talked about booking trends earlier, how they're now shortening, meaning that people are booking less ahead of time than they did 12 months ago. So we're looking at all that stuff and we're continuously updating it. But we can never be, and we will never be 100% perfect with it, primarily because the data is constantly changing, trends are constantly changing. But at the end of the day, it's so operationally heavy that how you perform the asset also has a big impact on it. So our goal is, we're trying to give you as much data upfront as possible to allow you to make the most educated decision on it, and we're going to continue doing that. We have some cool new features coming up in the coming weeks and months that are going to provide you with even more access and more transparency into the data. Without trying to overwhelm you, it's kind of a little bit of a balance that we're trying to share. And then the biggest thing for us is we want more input from our community on revenue projections on the top properties as well. So you notice as an agent partner, Tyler, we've now allowed our agent partners to come in and make changes to the estimates themselves, to do the comp selections on these estimates. So it's going to be a little bit more of a crowdsourced effort too, from local experts like your team across the United States. There's going to be a lot of that. We're now allowing people to list their properties for sale for free on our site, which we think is going to be a game changer. There's really no great place to find and list your property for sale. So that's going to allow us to connect real financials that you as the owner have to the asset, to the listing, so that people can review. So we're just going to try to give you, as the consumer, as much information as possible. And then again, we're continuously building out a network of partners who can then help you along the way in your journey. So we think a combination of more data and more partners that can help you along the journey is going to create the best experience for the end buyer, so that they can feel confident about their investment. Because these people are buying homes that a lot of times are $500,000, over $1 million, and that's a lot of money. So we want to educate them as much as possible. So our goal is education and resources that make them feel comfortable that their investment is the right strategy and that they're going to get the returns that they're looking for. So you're going to continue seeing improvements to our site and to our network of partners that do exactly that.
What do you think is the best feature that you guys have that other data platforms don't have?
I mean, there's a bunch of them. I mean, I think the ability to sell your listing, to list your listing is incredibly powerful. We've seen hundreds, almost a few thousand listings now that are on Rabu before they even hit the MLS. So that's been really interesting to see kind of where people are listing properties, because there's really no dedicated place if you're looking to buy or sell where you can get in front of STR buyers or sellers, right? Guys like you guys are great at helping identifying that. But if you're a consumer that doesn't even know where to start, Rabu is a great place to go to because we'll tell you where the best opportunities are, and we'll show you properties that are for sale that aren't even on the MLSs, because
Yeah.
it's easy to go to Zillow, but you're not going to find every property on Zillow that's a good short-term rental. It's much less know how much it's going to make. So I love that about our tool. We have a market finder tool as well that I love, that honestly we don't do a good enough job promoting, but it allows you to see what the top markets are in each state, where you can filter by state, by house value, by gross yield, by occupancy rate. You can see by state what markets are the best, have the highest upside. So in North Carolina, you can go look and see what the best opportunity to invest in is, and then you can go levels deeper, get market data on it, and then see the properties for sale in that market. So really, for us, it's all about educating the user base on the opportunity and kind of guiding them along where to look and how to actually transact.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, I'm looking at the market finder right now. It's really interesting. There's some places, for instance, in California where homes are $475,000 and do on average 100,000 a year, which I think is really interesting. So I'm definitely not using this enough either, for sure. So what do you think, talking top markets, what do you think are some emerging markets for this year? It's been, emerging markets was a term that so many people used in 2021 and 2022. And, I think it's kind of fallen by the wayside as people have explored more and more markets and kind of gotten into the nooks and crannies of the US here. Are there any emerging markets left?
Yeah, emerging markets is interesting. I would say maybe surprising markets is probably a better term for me, where I'm seeing a lot of opportunity and interest. I know you guys have Michael that represents the Poconos, but the Poconos is a really interesting market for me. I know Michael Klein is there with you guys. He's a great resource. Poconos is continuously still seeing some of the best ROI and best returns that I've seen anywhere in the United States, and it shows on our site, from a performance perspective and from an interest perspective. So the general Poconos area is really kind of the really interesting ones. We're seeing some really interesting ground up developments in the area too, because that is a little bit more of a older market. A lot of the homes are a little bit older. We're seeing some really interesting new construction there, kind of dedicated, built for short-term rentals that I like. So I love that market. I'm also a big fan of Western North Carolina. We're both in North Carolina. You're in Western North Carolina. Of course, Asheville's a little bit tougher because there's some regulations there. Me personally, I'm an investor in a Airbnb hotel in downtown Asheville that has, that has the right zoning. So it's one of the few kind of multifamily type of assets that's allowed in Asheville. But I love Asheville and all the adjacent markets. I think the popularity up there, unfortunately, what happened in October with the floods and the hurricane was a tragedy. Luckily, it's a 1,000-year storm. It's unlikely to happen again. I think there's a lot of great real estate out there and a lot of great opportunity up there. I know anybody who lives within a 300-mile radius just loves Asheville. So I think there's a lot of these drive-to destinations that I think are going to continue to perform well. One market I'm kind of keeping my eye on, and I'm not sure how I feel about it yet, is kind of Galveston and kind of the coast of Texas, the kind of the Gulf Coast of Texas. You're kind of hearing competing stories there. If it's either a terrible market or good market, I've seen some incredible deals, incredible returns out there. So that one's a little bit interesting to me. That I'm not 100% sure how I feel on, but it's kind of in like a in-between stage where it can be both a hit or a miss. But
Yeah.
there's some great opportunities up there that I've seen, and then really the Panhandle and into kind of Florida, and then the Alabama-Florida line and into kind of Alabama, that area, again, not emerging, but it's still continuously seeing good results there. Florida is by far our top kind of research and requested market. That has some opportunities there, but it's tough. There's a lot of stuff going on in Florida that make it a little bit tougher, but always a lot of demand in Florida. But yeah, I would say the Poconos are kind of the most surprising for me, and kind of still really well performing. Anything kind of North Carolina mountains area, I think is great. Western North Carolina, and there's some strategic spots along the beaches in the Carolinas and Georgia. I think there's some opportunities there as well. But there's not, based on the interest rate environment right now, there's nothing that's a home run that's out there that's easy to kind of navigate. I think you can make any market work with the right property and with the right team on the ground.
Yeah.
But those few are kind of the ones that are kind of sticking out to me as most worth watching right now,
Yeah.
diving into.
Yeah, there's some interesting data. I mean, I was just on the phone with a client a couple of minutes ago, and she asked me to look at Oak Island for her, and I was really surprised to find that the data from Oak Island is incredibly good. Year over year, everything is up double digits except for occupancy, and even occupancy was up like 5 or 6% year over year, which is surprising. It's hard to affect occupancy that much from a market wide perspective, right? So yeah, definitely, definitely some interesting markets out there for sure. And all those things are stuff that we can help with here at Savvy as well. If you guys are interested in any markets, we do a market match. We use data tools like Rabu to help match you with markets based on what your budget is, what sort of cash outlay you have. Sometimes nowadays, we've done so much work in Asheville on great design and amenities with one of my friends here, Ashita, who's an incredible Airbnb designer, that we've almost priced people out of the market to my own detriment, right? And I'm like looking at this going like, yeah, you have 100,000 to invest in and you're doing a 10 or 15% down loan, you probably shouldn't come here. But there are markets out there where you can go, and we can help you figure out what those are in a market match call. But I totally agree with you about the Poconos. I think it's really interesting. And they've got a light rail that they're building there from New York City as well. So not only a good cash flow market and some future reason why there will be more demand there, but I actually think for the real estate market in general, there's a lot of upside there. Prices are better than they are here in Western North Carolina. And we think what's going to happen is just like what happened in California, everything got so expensive in Silicon Valley that people moved 2 hours away and they're commuting 2 hours to go to work. And we think the same thing will happen in New York City, especially if they can just get on a train in the morning and head right into the city, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's going to be a big boon, even for the real estate market in general, not just for short-term rentals. And all those things are things you have to keep in mind. Like a home run means different things, I think, in short-term rentals. And we just had we poured 300,000 into redesigning our property here in Asheville, our big one. We turned it from a 6 to a 7 bedroom, added a ton of occupancy, a pickleball court, sauna, totally redid the game room and movie theater, and it turned out incredible. But we overspent a little bit more than we wanted to. But before we did this renovation, it appraised for 1.175. I wanted to pull PMI off and just see where we were at. So I had it personally appraised. And then we did this $300,000 renovation, and we were hoping to get dollars one for one, right? If I can get it to 1.475, amazing. We were hoping for 1.4, crossing our fingers for 1.5, and the appraisal came back at 2.19.
Wow.
$1 million in value in 3 months from investing $300,000 in a design and amenities, almost entirely cosmetic. We added a little bit of square footage with the garages, but definitely not as much as it would take to increase the value by $1 million. So there's a lot of different ways that a home run looks. If this property now, after I refi it, and I'm not even taking the full value out of it that I can, but even if it breaks even, it just made me 700 grand in a refi that I can kind of bring into a couple other investments. And ultimately, I think that there's a lot of different ways you can win in short-term rentals. But what I like so much more than long-term rentals, or a lot of other things, is the assets are typically expensive. And what that means that they appreciate faster, right? Or they don't appreciate faster, but they appreciate more because, an $800,000 house could be worth $900,000 in a year or 2 years, right? But a $100,000 house is not going to be worth 900,000 or even 200,000 in a year or 2 years. It'll be worth 130 or 140, right? And that's a 30 or 40% increase. So it's slow going with those type of assets. So for me, that's what I really, really like about short-term rentals. What's your favorite thing about short-term rentals?
I love what you just brought up, Tyler, because it's very true that we see a lot of people looking for bargains and hoping to kind of generate great cash and cash returns and long-term appreciation on those assets. But we've yet to see a great example of that working without somebody basically turning it down and building something that new in that location. So an example of your example that you just showed, amazing, congrats. That's it's not likely to happen, but it's much more common to happen than you think, especially when you're looking at an asset of that size and that initial equity versus doing something with a smaller asset. Also, it's going to get better booking, it's going to get higher return. So I'm 100% on the same page with you. We often purposefully don't display properties on Rabu that are sub 200 or even 300, just because we don't think those assets work 90% of the time in this asset class. And we're trying to be kind of educate our users and give them the best, kind of steer them in the right direction, if you will, without, doing steering. But yeah, 100% on the same page. So I love that. Beyond that, I mean, I think there's some significant tax advantages from being in this asset class that you can take advantage of, which I love, right? So we have a lot of professionals that are buying short-term rentals, not just for the immediate cash flow, but for tax savings. There's the STR loophole. There's a lot of ways you can leverage your STR for more, capital efficiency than just the cash flow itself. So I love that about the asset class. Is that there's multiple ways to monetize on it. We see so many different strategies from buyers to work with. We have some buyers that want to buy in a market that they love, and they're okay with barely breaking even or even losing money on the asset because they're making a long-term appreciation play, and they know if they turn into a long-term rental, they would see the same type of appreciation as they hold it, but their cash flow in the meantime is going to be significantly less. So we have those type of investors. We have the type of investors who are obviously just looking for cash flow. A lot of investors are looking for cash flow and for long-term appreciation. We have some individuals who are not even looking necessarily for cash flow, but they're always wanted to have a vacation property in Isle of Palms to use themselves for 6 weeks a year, but they Airbnb it out in the meantime and generate enough to set off their carry costs, right? So for them, it's a free vacation that they have and an asset that will likely appreciate. So there's so many ways to use this asset class, both for personal vacations and also building financial wealth that I think is unmatched in any other asset class. So that's my favorite thing about it, is that it works under so many strategies and there's so many ways to take advantage of it that it really is just the best asset class to invest in because of that flexibility and that opportunity to build wealth.
Speaking of tax benefits, what do you think? Is 100% bonus depreciation coming back this year?
I would hope so. We'll see. I've heard rumors that it might go even higher. So we'll see. I was actually meeting with a wealth advisor earlier this morning who helped a gentleman acquire a $4.7 million asset in the beach here in the Carolinas. And, he was making a bet that it's actually going to go even higher. So we'll see how that plays out. He's kind of keeping his fingers crossed. But yeah, will be interesting.
So like 120% bonus depreciation, what does that mean? Even higher?
Hey, he was throwing up over 150. So we'll see. We'll see. I didn't want to dig too deep because I didn't want to jinx anything. So I'm like, okay, I'll keep my mouth quiet. Won't ask too many questions. And
I'm gonna go right on Facebook Live and say it.
Yeah, right, exactly. Details.
Amazing. Yeah, I almost hope that it doesn't happen because I'm just thinking about how busy I'm gonna be, and that I'll have to cancel trips and all sorts of stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah,
it just means you have to grow your team. You got it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Any parting words for everybody?
Yeah, I mean, again, my parting word, I love this asset class. I'm a big believer in it. I would say ignore some of the noise that you're seeing out in public and the media. Again, the asset class is going through its awkward teenage years. It's going to come out to the best of it. And the people that participate now, that get it now, are still going to see significant upside from all the data points that we've seen. So, personally, we're still investing in short-term rentals. We're growing our portfolio. We love the asset class because of the many advantages that it provides and the flexibility it provides. So I wouldn't be scared off of anything that we're seeing in the market today. I think others will be, which means it's a great opportunity to be on the forefront and pounce on it and kind of take advantage of less competition.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. Earlier when I was talking about like the top 10% and the bottom 90%, and then I have clients that come here to Asheville and they're looking to purchase, and they're going online, they're seeing people complaining, and I'm going, yeah, that's the bottom 90%. So you're going to see 9 out of 10 people complaining, but we don't operate in that 90%. We operate in this 10% area, and the delta is huge between them, I think. So you're going to see a lot of people complaining. You're going to see a lot, and what you should think about, I think, is where Airbnb came from and what people have done. So a lot of those are small 1 bedrooms or studios or homestays, especially here in Asheville. Like, you're seeing a lot of people in my Asheville Airbnb host Facebook group saying like, oh, I'm not doing well, I have nothing for May, blah, blah, blah. But they don't give any context surrounding that. They don't say that they're a homestay. They're like, yeah, I'm right outside downtown. And my clients are going, oh my God, how am I going to compete with that? They're right outside downtown. They've been in this business for 10 years. And I'm like, yeah, here's their Airbnb link. Like, it's a homestay in their basement, and people just don't, I don't think people want to share their spaces like that anymore, especially post COVID. I think it changed things a little bit, where people don't want to travel like that very often. I think there's going to be a small subset. It was interesting for a little while, but I don't think it's going to be a long-term thing. So you have those people complaining, and those people can afford to hold on to the asset for a long time because it's in their basement. Like, it's not costing them anything to hold it. They're not making as much money as they were in 2015 when they, put a bed in their basement and then put it on Airbnb. And that's what they're complaining about. And ultimately, I think it's different than what we're doing as professional investors coming in and putting up, a resort Airbnb, right? Like a 5-star resort style amenitized Airbnb.
Yeah, no doubt. And I guess the only other thing to add to that, Tyler, too, is that you really don't want to build that budget Airbnb. When we operated properties, unfortunately, for us, thinking back on it now, one of the lessons learned, one of the many lessons learned, is we had some budget Airbnbs, and then we had some high end, top of the line, villas in Malibu Airbnbs, and the amount of support and issues that we saw on the budget Airbnbs was easily 30, 40x that we saw on the higher end. Budget Airbnbs, unfortunately, attract budget clientele, which lead to more issues. So you definitely don't want to put yourself in that space because it'll be tougher for you. It really will be. It won't be worth the juice won't be worth the squeeze, both from a return perspective, but then also from a mental and headspace perspective, because it's tough. It's a hospitality business. You want to attract the best. And those will usually actually have the least amount of issues for you to deal with.
Yeah, makes sense. Awesome. Cool, man. Well, everybody go check out rabbu.com, rabbu.com. If you haven't used it yet, it's a free data analysis tool. You can list your short-term rentals there for sale. You can connect with a lot of cool trusted resources like lenders, real estate agents. And I think, Emir, one thing that I really love and respect about what you guys do is how quickly you iterate, faster than anybody else in the industry. I think we were kind of talking about technical difficulties before I got on, and I was thinking like, yeah, but I mean, you guys are so fast and so good at what you do. Like, I'm sure stuff breaks in the back end, but I never see it. And I see stuff break on every other platform. So I don't know, what kind of juice you're feeding your developers over there, but it's good stuff.
Yeah, I have a great team. James, Justin deserve a shout out. Trent deserve a shout out on the team. They do a great job. So I love you saying that. I'll mention to them that you said it. They work their butts off to provide the best experience possible. We pride ourselves on the user experience, on providing free data and free tools, and making it as simple as possible. So that's the goal. I'm glad it's hitting home. So thank you for saying that.
Of course. All right, y'all. Well, if you have any questions, tag me in the comments. We'll come in and respond to them later. Thanks for tuning in.
Thank you, guys.